What's the problem with history? Welcome to ToK today. Please remember to hit like and subscribe if you want to remember the past and prepare for the future. In my experience, AOK history is the AOK that students find hardest to use in ToK.
Why is that, Daniel?
Let me explain why. Most students understand that there can be bias in historical knowledge, and they understand that bias can derive from the interpretation of historical evidence and the production of historical knowledge. However, not many students seem to understand that the very concept of historical knowledge is highly contested. We can start by roughly identifying two broad approaches on what historical knowledge is. These are the relativist approach and the absolutist approach. Okay, let's start with a concrete example. Let's ask a historical question, like, when did the Second World War start? It seems like a fairly straightforward question, and if we Google it, we're told that World War II started on the 1st of September 1939. That was when Germany invaded Poland. However, France and the UK didn't declare war on Germany until the 3rd of September 1939. So did it actually start on the 3rd of September? Further, Germany, Poland, UK and France at war isn't exactly a world war, it's a European war. So maybe we have to look at when the US entered the war in December 1941, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. However, the US was already supporting UK and France's war effort from September 1940, so maybe they entered the war then. Talking of Japan, they invaded Manchuria on the 19th of September 1931, 10 years earlier, so maybe that was the start of the Second World War. Or maybe it was when the Italians invaded Abyssinia in October 1935, and maybe it was the Spanish Civil War in 1936. Now, obviously it comes down to definitions. How are we defining Second World War? And definitions are all important in ToK, and this is just as evident in AOK history as it is in any other area of knowledge.
Tell it, Daniel.
Now, one of the main problems with the treatment of AOK history in ToK is that students often engage in the historical record, just as I did earlier, rather than in the production of historical knowledge. ToK studies how historical knowledge is made, not the historical knowledge itself. And sure, there's an overlap, but the focus needs to be on the construction of the historical knowledge rather than the knowledge itself. And this is where the relativist and absolutist approaches that I mentioned earlier come into effect. So, relativist and absolutist approaches to historical knowledge represent two distinct viewpoints concerning how history is constructed. And the fundamental difference between the two lies in their beliefs about the nature of truth, objectivity, and the role of perspectives in interpreting historical events. Okay, absolutists, who are similar to and sometimes grouped with objectivists, believe in the existence of a single, unalterable and objective truth. They argue that historical events are absolute facts, that they exist independently of individuals or societies that perceive them. In other words, absolutists believe that there is a factual truth, or a single true version of history. Or as one student put it recently to me, an actuality. So this is the idea that there is a single historical truth. And absolutist historians aspire to portray history as it's truly happened, asserting that there is a definitive account of historical events which can be known through meticulous research and comprehensive evidence. Now, they contend that the historian's role is similar to that of a scientist. It's unbiased, it's detached, it's seeking an unequivocal understanding of the past. Bias, they believe, can and should be removed through rigorous methodology. Now, most students that I meet have an absolutist view of history, which is fine, but in ToK we need to look at more than one perspective. and very few students look at the relativist view or the constructivist view of history. Relativists, often called constructivists, propose that our understanding of history is inherently subjective and multiple truths can exist. They contend that historical knowledge is not independent of our interpretation of it, but it's constructed through the lenses of culture, time, place, and personal perspective. So therefore it's not the events that matter, but it's the person who is interpreting or recording those events that decides what actually happened. They posit that it's impossible to separate historical facts from the context in which they're understood, implying that historical truth is relative to the observer's viewpoint or the historian's perspective. Relativist historians view their role more as interpreters, giving voice to different perspectives and narratives. They believe that bias is inevitable, and they consider it as a part of the narrative that can enrich our understanding of the past. Now, the strengths of the absolutist approach is that it's dedicated to objectivity, and there's a commitment to truth. Critics, however, point out that it may oversimplify complex historical events by seeking a singular, definitive narrative and ignoring different viewpoints. So, when did the Second World War start? Well, if you're in Poland, it started on the 1st of September 1939. But if you're in Manchuria, it might have started in 1931. And if you're in the USA, it might have started in 1941. It really depends upon who is making the judgment call. The relativist approach, whilst lauded for embracing complexity and multiple perspectives, is often criticised for its potential to lead to a form of historical relativism, where any interpretation could be seen as equally valid, regardless of evidence or logical consistency. This is what I say to my students is called the Maya of relativism, or the Maya of relativity. And it doesn't really get us very far in ToK if we only include that perspective. Now, in practice, most historians tend to use a blend of absolutist approach and relativist approach. They strive for objectivity and rigour whilst acknowledging that their understanding of the past is inevitably shaped by their perspectives and the context in which they work. And this approach helps to create a more nuanced, richly textured understanding of history, making room for both the pursuit of objective facts and the recognition of subjective interpretations. So, if you're considering using AOK history in your ToK exhibition or ToK essay, consider both approaches and all the other different approaches to the construction of historical knowledge. Don't just get stuck in a sort of absolutist view of history, but try to develop a more sophisticated discussion, and that will get you higher marks. Now, if you're looking for extra help with your ToK exhibition or your ToK essay, we've got loads of resources over at toktoday.com, including the ever-popular ebook, Every ToK Exhibition Prompt Explained, link in the video description. Thank you for watching today. Stay ToKtastic. Bye.